Good evening and welcome to this brand new testimony series. We'll be live streaming via YouTube on the last Sunday of each month, and I will be your host for these events. For those of you who don't know me already, my name is Joanna Hartle, and I met the Unification Movement and joined in the late 70s. A lot of the people who will be giving their testimonies are people I have known personally since that time. I hope you will enjoy watching today's video and that it will inspire you greatly in your walk of faith. Please join me in a prayer. Dearest Heavenly Parent and true parents of heaven, earth and humankind, thank you that we can have this opportunity to listen and learn from the testimony we're about to hear. Our dear elder brother Carlo has so much in his life. It's so rich and full of experiences. It's difficult to condense it into one short testimony on a video. But we know that everything is recorded in the spiritual world, so we'll be able to find out even more when we get there. I pray that our hearts will be open as we listen tonight, and really that we can enjoy this sharing. You, Heavenly Parent, are sharing your heart with us, the way in which you have worked in Carlo's life. Let us pray that our hearts are open to receive that. And I offer this now and pray that you can guide all brothers and sisters. Let us all open our hearts. And I pray this and report this in my name, Joanna Hartle, blessed Central Family, our Jew. everybody, and welcome to a series of broadcasts where pre-recorded testimonies of beloved brothers and sisters will be shared through live streaming. This programme, which lasts about an hour, will then be followed by a separate live, half-hour, interactive Zoom meeting, where it is possible to ask questions directly to the person who gave the testimony. Before we start, I just want to refresh your memory about what a testimony is supposed to be. In the Bible, we have the book of Acts. I'm sure you all have heard of the Bible. I've got one right here. And here you have the Acts of the Apostles. It's part of the New Testament. And this allows us to study the life of Christ, his apostles, and their experiences. In the same way, our experiences today are like a modern-day version of the Acts of the Apostles. Wouldn't it have been fantastic if we had had the opportunity to see a video with Jesus and his disciples and to see what they were doing? So we do have, however, our true Father Moon, his autobiography as a peace-loving global citizen. You've all heard of this book. Soon in the English language we're going to get the book of the autobiography of our true mother, Mother Moon, and that will be coming out in English language very soon. And we also have the autobiography of people who have followed in the footsteps of Father and Mother Moon, people like Henry Masters. We have his autobiography, The Eye of a Needle. So that's like a modern-day book of the Acts of the Apostles, what Henry's written. And I want everybody to understand the meaning of writing their own story so that we can have a record of their life, what they've done, what they've accomplished for Heavenly Father, how God has been working in their life. We want people to know how God works through each one of us, through you, through me, through everybody. So it's very important because this gives us faith. This can give us hope that God can work through each of us. So through our testimony, we can generate that faith, we can generate hope that can reinforce the faith, and that faith can change lives, it can move mountains, and it can also break down barriers. Through listening to testimonies, we can experience God's love for us, how God led someone to reach out to us and invest in us and raise us up. Tonight we're going to have the opportunity to hear the story of our elder brother, Carlo Zaccarelli. And I'd just like to make a very short snapshot introduction to Carlo and his life. The rest you'll hear from him personally. Carlo Zaccarelli was born in Italy and met the family, as Unification Movement was then known, in Rome, Italy, in 1967. He has been involved since that time as a full-time volunteer and is currently a very active member of our community here in Wiltshire. As a young man, Carlo studied engineering, and with his inborn talents and abilities to fix things, soon made himself indispensable to others when undertaking any sort of restoration and building work. And his creativity did not stop there. He soon emerged also as a talented artist. In the course of his life, Carlo has been active in the mission field while living in Italy, the UK, USA, Korea, Syria and Swaziland. He is the proud father of 6 children and 4 grandchildren. So without further ado, we will proceed to hear Carlo's testimony. Thank you and God bless you.
I woke up. I was surrounded by 4 other prisoners in a prison cell. I've been sleeping on a hard floor, and there was no way out. I realized that for the first time in my life I found myself without my freedom. While I was considering the situation, my mind went out to the voices coming through the window or children playing in the street. I wish I'd been there with them. I realized it was no joke. It was not a dream. I've been taken to that cell without any arrest, without any declaration. And I realized that no one knew I was there. And the words of the ambassador came back to me. He told me before, some people disappear and nobody knows what happened to them. That's why I tried times and times to make a phone call, talk to the ambassador, but with no hope. I realized that I had to face possibly torture. They probably thought I was a spy from Israel. My prayer to God became very clear. God, I'm not good at torture. I'll do my best. Please do the rest. And as I was waiting for something to happen, then the door opened and the guard called the name. And one man got out and followed the guard. Soon after that, another name was called and another man got out, prisoner. And finally my name was called. And so I followed this guard, very big man, big hands, so big that he took my hand in his hand and my hand had disappeared. And we walked to an office. 4 years before, in 1966, I was a student at Rome University studying engineering. My mother one day invited me to meet a very special lady. She was teaching about the universe and the atoms and God. And she said, you have to meet Doris. She's a special person. Although I was skeptical and possibly suspicious and not interested in religion, I thought after a while, okay, let's go. We went together with my mother. When the door opened, there was the most smiling lady, Barbara Burroughs, who said, welcome, we've been waiting for you. I felt immediately embraced by everybody. At the time, there were 4 more people there. Doris, who was there, Martin Porter, Marion Dougherty, and Dawn Faroni. I felt surrounded by a warm atmosphere. I felt at home, confident. We had a nice meal together. And then Doris said, with a big smile, would you like to hear the principal? Yes, I thought, yes. And so there was a blackboard, and Doris explained how the universe was constructed in the shape of God, and there was man and woman in a circle. So the whole presentation reminded me of physics and electronics that I studied at university. I was fascinated because for the first time I saw God in the same diagram with man and woman and protons and electrons. It blew my mind. I thought, this is amazing. This is beautiful. So the whole presentation won my heart. But most of all that won my heart was the very kindness and the sincerity of the people there, especially Doris. She was passionate about what she was saying. So I felt totally embraced, and I thought, this is something that I can never forget. I hope I can come back to this once more. When I saw the circle with man and woman inside, I was thrilled with joy. I felt the man and woman relationship was not just a fancy wish of mine or some kind of sinful thought I had in my brain. It was God's plan for all mankind, and particularly for me, which gave me an additional confidence that God actually prepared for me a woman, my woman. So having met the principal, and the people that lived in the house were actually foreigners to me. I was the only Italian, really. Then American, English, Guyana. And they were lived in a very harmonious way. And I felt a lot of trust. I felt a lot of even understanding. So life became very exciting, meeting new people every day and teaching the principal. I became a lecturer. So life was a completely new horizon. So then 3 years later, we heard the news that it was decided that some countries in Europe would send missionaries abroad. France would send missionaries to Lebanon, England was sent to Jordan, and Italy was sent to Syria. When we all sat at the dinner table and looked at each other, we wondered, Italy, who can go to Syria? My first suggestion was, we're going to find a student at the university, Syrian students, teach them the principle, and send them over. They all nodded. There was not so much excitement about the idea. It took some time for me to realize that if nobody was ready to go, then maybe I should go. I did ask God at the time, is it a good idea? And the answer very powerfully came to me, yes, it's a good idea. So I went to the central figure at the center there, and I said, I want to go to Syria. Are you sure? You don't speak the language? I can learn the language. What about the money? Have you got the money for the ticket? I can work. I calculated it was 40 days until the 1st of January 1970. 40 days is a good number. So I decided I would work for 40 days and get a ticket and fly to Syria. I bought a book of languages, of Arabic. So there I was studying Arabic from a book. It's a very interesting language. That was my busy time focusing on the mission. So the time came, ready to go. Even the money, everything was ready. My parents helped me with the money. So I'd asked my father, could you take me to the airport? And father agreed. We had to go to the airport. And I told my father the plane would leave at 1:30. But preparing, eventually I realized I was delayed, I was late, and my father was patiently waiting. Eventually, by the time I got in the car, he said to me, are you sure you want to go? It's already 2 o'clock and your plane is 2:30. Why don't you just go back and try another time? No, I said, I wanted to go. I wanted to absolutely do it. So we drove all the way to the airport. And the ticket office looked at me with complete disbelief. How come you're here for a 1:30 plane and it's 2:30? And he said, anyway, you're lucky. Your plane has been delayed. And you'll be leaving In half an hour, you have just about time to go. So gladly I went on the plane on my way to my mission. There was an exciting time being in Damascus, a beautiful city. In the sunshine, you could see the glittering of all the buildings and the mosques, the minarets. Being in another world for me was a dream of my life, and the fact that the whole culture was so different to me was exciting, inspiring. Meeting with people who saw me as a foreigner, as I was, and very kindly they asked me. Most people speak English already there. Where are you from? And I said, I come from Italy. So what are you doing here? I come to study the culture and the language. They were very willing to help and try to find a place for me to stay, try to remind me that I needed a visa every month. Everything was helping me, and I felt surrounded by support, help, guidance, some like a magic force helping me out. Then I met lots of students, visited the university. Damascus University is quite big with a lot of faculties, and meeting the students gave me an insight into the culture of Syria, how they live. A recurring theme was the war, the 6-day war that's just finished 3 years earlier, in which the Israeli forces obliterated all the Arab armies around the Middle East. A friend I met, Hassan al-Buni, who lived in a rich house and was the son of a rich family. In fact, even the road of this house is called Syria al-Buni, which is like the name of the road. And proudly he showed me a piece of a phantom jet that he was hanging on the wall, a fraction of a rudder. And he said with pride, yes, we will defeat the imperialistic America. So I enrolled in a language school for foreigners. We were a small group, but the teacher was extremely enthusiastic and filled with passion about the language. Al-Lughati al-Dard, he said, which means the language of the Dard, is one of the letters of the Arabic language. I learned different aspects of the culture, but mostly walking around Damascus was very revealing. And the markets, the al-Suq, al-Amidiya, different markets in Damascus. And you can buy this gorgeous food, and especially some sweet halwa is called. And also they said the jibne, which is some form of yogurt, very condensed yogurt, which the Bedouins take on their trip through the desert. And the people themselves were always an inspiration to me. Talking to them, I met interesting people like this. An interesting point was I had to renew my passport visa every month. So I went to the passport office, which is a part of the police. And there was a Russian person behind the counter. So I could see much of the authority, much of the police system was controlled by Russians. They were everywhere. They were really almost running the country. People who didn't know me even probably must have thought, where do I come from? I know this because once I took my trousers for dry cleaning, And as they do over there, instead of giving you a ticket with the trousers, they wrote something on the inside pocket. And what they wrote was Al-Rusi, which means the Russian. So obviously, they thought I was Russian. The Muslim people are extremely welcoming. Often students I met, they would invite me to their houses for tea with big celebration. And after that, they invited me for dinner. So I could see they tried their best to make me feel like a VIP. And certainly I was to them. They probably never seen many foreigners. I realized that they have an incredible sense of loyalty and very respectful to other people. I couldn't be really satisfied unless I'd visited everything around Damascus. And I took my walks out of the city, possibly in the countryside. And once I remember walking by a big fence. Next time I went to the passport office, the man in the office said to me, "What were you doing by the airport last week?" So without knowing, I was actually very close to the airport, which is, of course, military and totally controlled by the militaries. It made me realize that I wasn't just alone and people were watching me. Our Italian ambassador, he was very kind. A few times he invited me for dinner, and he felt happy to share with me all the stories of Syria. And once he told me, in Syria there is a strong regime of Russians. They control many things. Don't get in trouble with them. Sometimes people disappear and nobody knows what happened to them. The war with Israel was always the big point which overshadowed all the activities in Damascus. And I came face to face with it when I saw once a dogfight just outside Damascus. Planes in the sky, racing each other, fighting each other. There was obviously Syrian planes and Israeli planes. There were sound of bombs, explosions. Soon after that, the sound of sirens of ambulances driving past the main street. The first ambulance is carrying wounded. The second ambulance is carrying dead bodies. And the final ambulance is carrying body parts. It was frightening. I could feel the deep sorrow for the nation, the people. The sorrow of God seeing his own children being destroyed in such a horrible way. And the atrocities of war continued. Occasionally, a jet plane from Israel would fly at high speed, plus the sound speed, over the city. And in the process, the sonic bang would shatter the windows. I was once at university, talking to people. When we had a big explosion, we all ran through the windows to see the red light of a jet running away into the afternoon sky. And it was followed by tracing bullets. The red tracers tried to hit him as he was racing forward and going higher and higher and higher. And I knew behind the red light there was a very intense and probably very scared Israeli pilot. and the plane managed to escape safely. So everything was controlled by the tension in the air. Well, I had to look for accommodation, change many times, always trying to find the best. At one point, I met two brothers who were living in a flat. So they had a spare room, and I stayed with them. One day, I received a letter from one of our members telling me, "Oh, we have a new missionary in Israel now." The evening when I came home, the landlord confronted me with real anger. And he said, you are a spy from Israel. Now we know who you are. It took me time to calm him down and convince him that I wasn't. It took me more than half an hour talking to him, calm him down. When he did eventually calm down, I felt I wasn't safe in that house. And quickly, I tried to move. And I went and I found a place in a student's accommodation, which is just outside the city. So there I was, this time with my own little room. And I felt more free to operate. I even applied for a work permit, which would help me to make some money. So one evening as I came home, the porter at the entrance of the student accommodation said, "Somebody wants to see you." And then I remember this man waiting for me and said, "Your passport visa is ready to be collected." And I said, "Well, I can go tomorrow. I'm sure I can go there." "Oh, no," he said, "you can come with me now." So I went with him in his car. We went to the passport office. And there I was. Instead of stopping at the desk where the visa is given, we walked by through corridors, open doors, more corridors, and eventually the last door, it was open. I walked in. When I entered the room, was actually a prison cell with 4 prisoners there, sitting on the floor. They looked at me, not with surprise. They were used to people being taken in. They welcomed me in a way, and they said, "So what have you done?" "I don't know," I said. They smiled because they knew what they had done. So they probably realized that I must have done something. I had to readjust very quickly to the situation. Suddenly, I was taken to a cell with no official records. Nobody had arrested me. The first thing I would do, call the ambassador, the Italian ambassador. I called across the cell window and I shouted, "I want to make a telephone call." The guard outside looked at me and smiled. That's all I could get. They were not going to make me make a phone call. And then the words of the ambassador came back to me. People disappear, nobody knows what happened to them. So I was in a panic now. I had to quickly find a way to communicate. And I tried to write a message, but I had nothing to write on. I even asked, "Can I have some pen and paper?" And on the smile was the answer. No way. I even looked for something to write on. And there was a spent matchstick on the floor. And I needed a bit of paper. I found some strip of paper and I started writing, "Please call this number." But there was not much more I could do for that. I found out that there was a boy there that would come sometime with food. They gave him a little money and they would bring food for everybody. Then I thought, this is my chance. So when the boy came with the food, I quickly put a little strip of paper in his hand. And I said, please give this to somebody. I had no other choice. It was a desperate situation. That evening I couldn't eat. I was not hungry. Prisoners insisted, you must eat. You must eat. They knew that life was going to be hard there. So I managed to eat something. As the evening came, they gave me blankets to put on the floor because there's no other way we could sleep. I realized it was my chance to consider my situation, offer my prayers, but most of all, recognize that I needed God now more than any time else. Somebody came with some form of breakfast. I wasn't hungry at all. I was just upset. I was furious to be in the situation that I didn't foresee. And yet I knew that I had to do the right things in that particular time of my life. So I settled to think, what can happen now? And I can imagine somebody would come and call my name. In fact, the door opened and the guard called a name. It wasn't me. And a few minutes later, the door opened again and that person had gone, and they called out another person. And I knew sometime my name would come up. So when the door opened next, it was me. My name was called. So I followed this guard. He was a big fella with massive hands, huge hands that would just envelop my hand into nothing. And so we went together to an office. There was an official in uniform who basically, he said, you're not welcome here. So he gave me my passport and then left me with the guard. And so the guard took me down to the road into a truck, small truck. The truck was a three-seater at the front. The driver, I in the middle, and the guard on the other side. Well protected, so that there was no way for me to escape. I thought we were going to the place where the barracks are, and probably the place where they torture the people. So I looked around with intensity, waiting for that moment. We drove by the city and past the main center and drove on again. I thought there must be some barracks on the outskirts of the town. Eventually we were on the desert, driving through the desert. Then I thought there must be some barracks in the desert somewhere. There was a winding road in an open desert. And all my thoughts were going to all the films I've seen in the past. And I knew that any of my heroes in that situation would do something dramatic and crazy. So I thought I could put my foot on the brake when there is a sharp bend. They will normally cause the car to swerve and possibly tumble over, and I could escape that way. Now I realize it wasn't such a good idea, and I'm glad I didn't do it. Because the desert is a big place to run away from. I realized that the desert was still a long way ahead of us, and there was no sign of barracks. And I kept thinking, what can happen next? It was a long, excruciating drive into a barren land with no other cars coming outside. And eventually we arrived to what I recognize as the border with Lebanon. So the car stopped, we got out, and I was taken into an office near the road. In the office, there was no one there, just a desk. The guard walked into another door, and I looked at the situation, and I realized I was left alone. And I looked on the desk, and there was a telegram where I could read my name. Carlo Zaccarelli was written on the telegram. No one was there, just me in an empty room with a door to the street, windows everywhere. So I started walking around the room, and I touched the handle of the door, and I saw that it could open. So I pushed it open. There was me on the road, facing the shop across, where I could go and quickly make a phone call to my ambassador. So I walked out, ran into the shop, and quickly I asked him, "Can you please call this number? Please call this number now." And while the shopkeeper was working on that, a hand fell on my shoulder. The guard had caught up with me. He wasn't happy at all to see me there. I could recognize the sound of his voice. And we went back into the room, and he told me sternly, "Don't you go anywhere." So then, after a wait, a general came, or somebody with a lot of military decorations on. He sat at the desk, and he looked at me. He gave me my passport. He didn't say anything. So the guard took me out of the place, onto the road, across the road to the place where the Lebanon border was, and walked away. I waited there for a minute. I looked around. There's nobody around apart the normal traffic. And the guard, the Lebanese guard, was there. And then I said, "What's going on?" And very simply he said, "They just kicked you out." Although I was there on my own, it was not easy to get a lift. Then a car came. They gave me a lift. It was actually a mini hearse, painted pink. One of those for children's funerals. Then I thought, well, it will be just as good for me. So I got my lift all the way to Beirut. Once in the city, my mind had been wondering what had happened. I looked at my passport. There was no trace of being kicked out. So I wonder why they gave me my passport and let me loose. Probably they were trying to chase me, follow me, and see where was my headquarters. If I was a spy, they wanted to know. And that made me more worried again, because I couldn't just walk normally in the streets of Beirut. At the time, Lebanon had not been destroyed by the war. It was still a beautiful city, rich with splendor. Going around the streets, the first thing I felt I should be doing, call the ambassador. As soon as I found a telephone and I called him, he was so happy to hear me. How are you? I said, I'm calling from Beirut. How nice. You are moving around, isn't it good? So how are you feeling? I told him directly how I felt. I've just been imprisoned. I've been put in prison without any explanation. Nothing. And they kicked me out. Oh, the ambassador got really furious with me. What have you done? Did I tell you? Some people just disappear. Nobody knows what happened to them.
It was a very difficult time. I was rejected by the ambassador. I felt abandoned, but I knew that God would never abandon me. I wanted to comfort God and tell him not to worry about me, that we'll find a way around. That's what Father Moon did in times of difficulty and struggle. So I decided I'll go to the beach and I pray and ask God what to do next. In the morning when I woke up, I knew I'd already made up my mind. I will go back to Syria. And so I found myself walking to the taxi station. And in the taxi, there was no way back. Now the taxi was driving towards the border. And I knew that things were going to be very different from now. When we arrived at the border, I knew that also the driver would take all the passports, take them into the office and come back with the passports. But when he went to the office, it took ages to come back, and I thought something may happen there. Maybe they'll stop my passport, maybe they say this person cannot go. I waited and waited and waited for an eternity until then eventually the driver came back and we were moving again towards Damascus.
So I was back in Damascus, but I was not safe. I still had this hanging problem of my passport being clear. But what about the police? Were they still after me? I couldn't find another solution than to go back to the passport office and clearly find out what is my passport situation. Is this okay or not? And so I did. I walked into passport office. Even the normal clerk welcomed me because he saw me coming as usual every month. But someone else saw me there. This was the very guard who had taken me to prison. He walked into the room and was like frozen, looking at me as if it was a dream. Could it be true? He couldn't believe it. I was there after all the effort to kick me out. So he spent a few moments thinking about it, but eventually he took me back into the same cell I'd come from. Back in prison again. I didn't know if the situation was better or worse than before. This time, I still had to face whatever confrontation with the local police, and I was taken again to the same office and the same official who took me out the first time. And this time he said, "You're not welcome." He wrote something on the passport and he gave it back to me. I was back again on the truck on my way to Lebanon. And this time I didn't know how it would end. The truck took me back to Lebanon. From there, I had no choice. My passport had been signed and I couldn't go back to Syria. The only way was for me to go back to Italy. And it was me, back in Rome, after being through such an adventure. I felt really unfulfilled and perhaps dismayed, but meeting Martin
he welcomed me, and I felt there was a new beginning, a new start, back to life in Rome as it was before. A few days later, Martin came with the good news, and he said, we had received the news that it's going to be a blessing in Korea of 777 couple, international blessing. Would you like to go? I was exhilarated. And he said, the Reverend Moon has asked for you to come. The joy was so great in my heart that I held it back without exploding into a bout of enthusiasm. Whom would you like to marry? That was a very good question. Two years before in England, I'd met this lovely girl called Barbara. And I thought I will ask her if she would like to become my wife. And to my joy and surprise, she did. In fact, she came all the way to Rome to meet me. And that's how we started our journey to Korea. I was beyond myself. I couldn't believe it. Plus, she had changed a lot after 2 years. She got a hairdo, she got makeup and a beautiful dress. I was totally, not embarrassed, but weak on the knees, we say. I didn't know what to say. And she looked at me waiting for something meaningful to come out of me. But I was quite shocked and happy. And there was the beginning of a brand new adventure. On the way to Korea, my mind was all over the place. But most important, I realized that Barbara is a special name in my life. The town I was born in, Carbonia in Sardinia, is a saint patron, Santa Barbara. Now, the first person that opened the door as I went into the movement, it was Barbara Burros, now from Prague. And then I realized that God had already planned something for me, very special. And even my adventures in Syria and the fact that I came out alive was a providential meaning to allow me to go to the blessing and to be married to Barbara. So God, even in the difficult circumstances, has a beautiful plan for me. For this I'm grateful. It has been such a joy to share these experiences with you and to be able to understand how God has been working with me and with all of us. I know from the beginning of my mission, even the time when the plane was delayed, it wasn't a chance. There was a clear plan of God to help me. So now, on reflection, I say, even when we come through difficult circumstances and we learn to ride the storm, then God is with us. And we have incredible examples given to us by God's people. We understand how Reverend Moon went through very difficult circumstances, more than possibly any human being can imagine. Even meeting people in the streets, they gave me advice, they helped me, guided me in what I was doing. I felt overwhelmed by the presence of such guidance that I remember one day coming back home, I fell on my bed and I cried to God and I said to God, why do you love me so much? I felt God's love was unbelievable. And so this is my lesson and my message. We are surrounded by the love of God. And it's our opportunity to take any experience with the knowledge that we are actually helping God and fulfilling God's providence, but most of all, we are fulfilling
God's plan to make mankind happy and glorious.
Wow, that was an exciting story. I hope you were inspired by it. I'd like to thank you all very much for watching. If you were inspired and you would like to know more, then join us now in the Zoom call, which will be going live as soon as we're finished. Most of all, I'd like to give thanks to Carlo for recording his testimony and making tonight's program possible. I hope you've enjoyed watching and see you again soon. Bye.